Let's start. So we're going to talk today about generative AI, AI and regulated industries. So I'm Fabrice Lacroix. I'm the founder and CEO of Fluid Topics. So we're a software vendor, and the platform that we have engineered and created is called a content delivery platform. So the aim of such a solution is to reinvent the way your users will search, read, navigate, engage with your documentation, product knowledge. So it's made of different parts. One being the upstream part, collecting any type of information in any format that you have in your company, whether you write in data or you have as well as silos in Markdown, API documentation, help desk cases, knowledge bases. So we collect all that and we build this unified repository of fine-grained content, and then we make that content available into any touch point where it's needed for your stakeholders to be more efficient in adopting, configuring, running, fixing, servicing your products. So we can build doc portal that can be in product help, that can be field maintenance applications. So wherever that content is needed, we dynamically feed those touch points. So that's the idea of Fluid Topics. So that's what we do. We help our customers, tech industries with sophisticated products achieve this transformation in the way they operate customer support and field service operation to become more efficient. So typical customers using Fluid Topics, so you see that. And some of them, interestingly, are subject to these regulations, like you see here, Roche Diagnostics or Thermo Fisher. So we'll discuss that. Enough about us. So the question of today is discussing generative AI. And if you wonder what's the relationship with what we do, the CDP and AI, I think the answer is pretty simple. AI is all about content. AI needs content. If you do generative AI, it lives by content. So whether you want to train a foundational model like GPT-4, OpenAI, so Unit GPT-4 has been trained with 40 billion pages of content. So you need that content to train the model. But if you want to fine-tune a model with your own content, you need content as well. Or if you use a generic model and you want to do RAG for chatbots within context learning and all that, it's still based on content. So the content is the raw material on which generative AI works. And that's one of the huge value of Fluid Topics, giving you this capability, native capability to ingest all this content around your product that exists in your company as it is in its native format, process that content, transform that content, and create this repository on which we apply generative AI technology. Okay, so that's the thing we do. So now that we understand better the relationship between generative AI and CDP, now we're going to deep dive into this question. Is generative AI ready for transforming content delivery in the context of regulated industries? If you listen to your legal department, compliance department, whoever is monitoring that in your company, probably will tell never. I mean, it's too new, it's not mature. Everybody knows it's hallucinating, it's biased. We can't do it. It's not validated. It's not certified, accepted by authorities. And you can understand there are too many risks. There are really too many risks, definitely too many risks. So let's not do it. And it's right. If you look at the Gartner's hype cycle for emerging technology, this is where AI sits. The generative AI, prompt engineering, all that is at the peak of inflated expectations, with maturity expected to be in 2 to 5 years, which means as well that within the next 2 years, it's probably going to fall into this trough of disillusionment. So everybody will realize that it's not working that well, and we have to work harder to make the technology work, which means that probably the right time for regulated industries would be to start thinking about using AI in about 4 or 5 years when all the problems have been solved, and then let's do nothing and wait. And probably your legal department is right. So that could be the end of this presentation. So maybe we should stop here and say, let's wait 4 years, and then maybe in 4 years, we'll do another meeting, but maybe not. So let's keep on digging into that subject, and I have 48 more slides for you to go to. So the first question is, can we use it? And I'd like to introduce the subject of the relationship with AI in regulated industries with this subject I absolutely love, which is the problem of protein folding. I don't know if you're familiar with proteins. So proteins are the building blocks of tissues, muscle, enzymes, hormones, immune cells, and orchestrate a myriad of biological processes. So those proteins are made of amino acid sequences. So amino acids, there are 22 of them only, so like small Lego blocks. And if you take any of those 22 amino acids and you assemble them, you create sequences. And each of these one sequence is a protein, okay? So finding the sequence is easy. Knowing what amino acids built are inside of one given protein is easy. But what is difficult is knowing how this sequence of amino acid sequence folds and has a 3D shape. So that's the one problem that is a €1 trillion problem to solve, which is what is the shape of a protein. If we know the sequence of the building blocks, how does it fold, and what's the 3D representation? Because if you know that, then you can create vaccines, cure cancer, all of that. So that's the €1 trillion problem to solve. What's the shape of a protein, knowing the sequence of the amino acids, which is not that difficult to find. So today we know about 200 million of these proteins, out of which we only know the shape for 157 of them, which is almost nothing. And it took 60 years to compute the shape, to know the shape of only 157 proteins out of 200 million. And the first one that has been identified, the first shape, is from 1958 by Max Perutz, and he won the Nobel Prize in chemistry in 1962 for that, having discovered the shape of hemoglobin using X-ray crystallography. So now, roughly 3 ways until now to know the shape, the 3D structure of a protein, by doing X-ray crystallography. And for each protein, it's super difficult, takes a lot of time, it's very expensive. And that's why after 60 years, we only know the shape of 150 of them out of 200 million. It's such an important problem that computer scientists, as everybody knows, that are smarter than anyone, say we are going to solve that problem, and it's starting to say we are going to compute that with computers. We are going to invent those algorithms and compute that. And when I started studying computer science, oh my God, 1990, so well, 35 years ago, that was already a key problem to solve. And at that time, we were using massive supercomputers like this KY-MP computer to try computing the structure of a protein, and just trying all the combinations for one protein would take more than the age of the universe for just one protein. So pretty much over 40, 50 years, no real progress were made, even though many people have tried. And that problem was never cracked using computer science and computers to figure out the shape of a given protein. And there's even a contest for that, which is called CASP, which is every 2 years. And I think there's a 14th edition of that. So it started 28 years ago. And every 2 years, there's a contest where people join. They are given the sequence of a protein, or multiple ones, and they have to try to compute the shape. They give the result that they have, and it's compared to what the experiment has proven. So we don't give them the answer, it's unknown yet, but it has been computed with X-ray crystallography. And you try to discover that shape, and people measure the distance between the X-ray crystallography computed shape of the protein and what your algorithm has computed. And based on the distance for each atom, you have a score for that. And after 50 years of investment, the best score is about 40%, which is considered as non-usable. 40 years of investment until, guess what, 2017. And I guess that now everybody has heard about this paper from a Google research team, which is called Attention is All You Need, which was a new way of analyzing mostly text at that time using transformers. And this is the paper that was the foundation for developing the GPT models, the transformer model, that is used by OpenAI for developing ChatGPT. So that paper has changed, that is the trigger that made this modern AI possible. What is and ChatGPT is from 2021. But what is interesting here is that the same paper from 2017 was used even a bit earlier by another team from Google. That's a company that Google acquired called DeepMind. And DeepMind is known for having developed this AlphaGo thing, which won the Go game against Lee Sedol. And Go was supposed to be the most complex game to play by a computer. And DeepMind developed AlphaGo that beat Lee Sedol, the world champion in Go. So that was considered a massive achievement. And that team said, okay, solving that Go game problem was not that difficult. Let's find something a bit more complex. Oh, protein folding. Everybody failed for 50 years, and let's try that. And what they did is they took this attention is all you need approach to develop a transformer, attention-based transformer that they called EvoFarmer, for learning from the 150,000 known protein shapes. And then they've developed something, and guess what? They entered the contest in 2018 with the first version, and suddenly they went from 40% to 60%, and they came back 2 years later, and they reached the score of 90%, which is considered good enough to be used in production. It's not perfect, it's 100%, but 90% score means on average, the distance for each atom that forms these proteins, that are hundreds of thousands of them, the average distance for each atom they have is about a 1 angstrom, okay? So it's tiny, so it's minimal. So you see here in those rotating images, in green, that's the expected results computed with X-ray crystallography, and in blue, that's what AlphaFold computes, and you see how much it matches the prediction. So it's super accurate. It's all done with generative AI and the same algorithms and the same approach that is used by ChatGPT, purely generative, purely machine learning based. To the point that, so now we know the shapes in 3 years after that. They've used the algorithm and they have computed the shape of the 200 million proteins that were in the database, for which we didn't know the shape, except for the 150 of them. And now the database of proteins has all the shapes after only 3 years, thanks to GenAI and thanks to DeepMind. So much that Demis Hassabis and John Jumper won the Nobel Prize, the Chemistry Nobel Prize in 2024. The Nobel Prize was won by computer scientists for using GenAI for solving the protein folding problem. That's the story, and I absolutely love this story. Besides, I mean, I don't know if you're aware of that, but really, this is a breakthrough in medicine and biology, and it's opening new venues for drugs discovery and vaccines and all of that. So it's just now, so it's opening. It's gonna be massive. What we expect from these transformations will be transformative to medicine in the next years to come. So now that we have this story in mind, I would say it's not perfect. It's 92%, but it's 1 angstrom distance only from one atom to the distance between the reality by X-ray crystallography and generative AI computed model. It's not perfect, but it's so good that it works. And then the question is, can regulated industries not afford not to embrace the opportunity? Because there's 1 angstrom difference means that they shouldn't use the model computed for these 200 million proteins? No, for sure. So the question, generally speaking, is not whether or not such heavily regulated industries should or not use GenAI. It's not an if, it's about how to use it, when to use it, and what to expect from it. So talking about content now, because we were elaborating on this protein folding problem. Well, let's look what we can do when it comes to content and content delivery in particular, because this is our subject of today. So does it work? Is it production ready? What's the percentage, the accuracy, and can we trust it? And the first answer is it depends on the use case. So there are some use cases that are very obvious and that work very well, for which we have an accuracy of say 92, 95%, which by the way is roughly for any problem in which we involve humans for solving the problem. Humans are not perfect, and usually it's considered that 92% is in almost any sort of problem is the performance of a group of humans for solving a problem. So if we can reach this 92%, then we know that the machines are as good as humans, not perfect, but as good as. And there are some more complex use cases, and in which case we need to know where we are to this golden score of 90%, if we're above or below, and what's the gap to that. So some of the easy use cases that are way below 90% of accuracy, whatever you do, are typically enhancing the reading experience. So if you have to deliver content to any people, and in that case, we are looking at a procedure, maintenance procedure. And if you want, for example, to help your field technicians to preparing for that maintenance work by preparing the toolbox or the spare parts they will need, you can use AI to make AI read the entire procedure, because imagine if it's a 200 pages procedure, that can be quite painful to go through. And then you can add this sort of mechanism where you hand over the content to the LLM, to the AI system, and say, please read the document and let me know the list of tools and parts that you have found in that document. So, and you see here that an LLM can read 200 pages in about a second or two and give you back this list of parts and tools. So that works well. Precision is there, 90, 92, 94%. You can as well do things like content summarization, or you could even use AI-based, not necessarily LLM, but deep learning system for translation. And we know now that well-trained system, especially if you have glossaries and past translation to use for training the system, retraining, fine-tuning the system based on your content, machine-based translation now is at 90, 92, 93%. So as good as human, as long as you have glossaries and past translation to fine-tune the model. So you can rely on that. What else? And you can use AI for improving content or make LLMs read your content, suggest improvement to the content, readability, and so forth. So everything that is about reading content, making LLMs read the content for you and do sort of this light transformation, summarization, all that works pretty well today. And we've reached this level of, especially the latest models since GPT-4, and GPT-4 is from, oh my God, 2 years ago, a year and a half. So latest models are even better. So we are way above this 90% quality. So we can use AI for that. There are still more complex use cases that have even more value, and for which we can start using AI, which is, for example, ensuring content consistency across time, version, and variants. Okay, so let's imagine you have a product, whether it's medical devices or whatever it is, and you write documentation for that version 1 of the product in English, and then as well, you have maybe troubleshooting guides, knowledge-based articles written by experts, question and answers in your help desk tool. So you start having the core documentation and maybe ancillary content around that. But then you start translating that, like in French, or some manuals in German only, and then you create a variant of your product for Asia, and you start translating in Japanese, whether you use just empty translation or human translation or MT translation, machine-based translation plus human validating, you've got content, okay? And then you do a variant B for Latin American market, translate in Spanish, and then you've got a version 2 of that product because it's very successful. So you make a version 2 of your installation manual or the operations per user, IFUs manual and all that, and version 2 for Asia and blah, blah, blah. So you see the point. Your product lines and your product evolves over time, get varianted, specialized for some countries, for some markets. And then comes the question. You have KB articles written by some experts for version 1 of your product, and then the question is, does this KB article still apply in the case of a version 2 for the Asian market? Can we reuse that, or is there a risk that someone using a KB article that has been written for version 1 makes a mistake? Does it mean that all the knowledge that has been written or the ancillary content that exists in your company around one version of the product should be fully discarded and you restart from scratch for the next version of the product? Or is some of that knowledge still valid for the next version of your product? Because it's good if you can reuse that, because you can provide more knowledge to your stakeholders, which is reducing risk. But if the article is not valid enough and valid anymore, then you increase the risk. So maybe you have to check the consistency and the validity between those articles, and note if one article for version 1, by checking what's inside the knowledge base article with the documentation, can still work by comparing it with the core documentation version 2A that exists. So that's typically the sort of things that you can try and do with AI, is use AI not just for internally, for analyzing your content, spotting gaps, spotting differences, and trying to analyze and figure out what content becomes a risk, liability to your company, and should be sort of discarded and avoided because it's out of relevance for your products, or which one can be still used by your technicians, your customers for solving specific issues. That can be as well, so creating this consistency can be inside one version. So you can still say, oh, is that KB article, troubleshooting manual, API spec, still, is it consistent with my core documentation? So checking consistency between core validated content and sort of ancillary content that exists in your company, or again, checking applicability of content between different versions and variants of your product. So that's a good use case. And I think here that can only help you. Doesn't mean that it's perfect, but again, if it can help you spot and avoid content that would become inapplicable and becomes a risk for your company, that's helping you, that avoids you rereading everything for checking everything. You can still use AI on your content for internal usage. So I don't know, is the work of people working on certification, or you can do the dreamed of magic chatbot for helping your technicians. So maybe you wouldn't use a chatbot for untrained people like end customers, but if you have trained technicians, if you can help them because they can still have sort of this magic chatbot answering any question, but they can check the doc as well at the same time, so it's like a help to them, then it's still a valid use case. So the question is not just about the technology, it's about knowing when to use it, to whom to make that technology available. So it's not perfect, and the point is not about being perfect when using AI, it's more about knowing the gap to perfection between what you put in place and what would be the perfection. That's the same for translation, okay? Knowing how far you are with an empty engine to human translation and compare the gaps. So we need to evaluate, we need numbers, we need a methodology for that. Whatever you would do with AI needs to be evaluated, and it's probably something that people tend to forget. They build AI systems, but they don't incorporate as part of the definition of done of the project all the tooling that goes around that is monitoring the quality and the evolution over time on how your system evolves. And this needs to be really, really done as part of the project. That's part of the definition of done. And as you know, this famous quote by Peter Drucker, if you don't measure it, you cannot manage it, or by Kelvin, if you don't measure it, you cannot improve it. So measuring is key. And that's probably something that among the people we've seen, many companies don't do. They just develop something, they try it, they say it seems to work, but do they have an accurate, precise measure and a methodology for measuring the quality of what they do? The same way than with the CASP contest I've shown you for protein folding, there is a way to measure the distance between the X-ray crystallography model and the computed model, and to give a score to each computed version to know if the algorithm is good or not and how far it is from the lab computed model. So I would like to give you an example of what it means to build a methodology and compute and measure the accuracy of an AI system. So again, I've presented you before many use cases, well, few use cases in which you can apply generative AI on content, transforming content, extracting pattern tools for easing the life of field technicians, improving your content, checking content consistency across versions, all of that. And for each use case that you use, for which you use GenAI, you need to build a specific methodology. So I've chosen one use case and show you the methodology we've built for measuring the accuracy of an AI system. So the use case we've chosen is, can we use AI for automating reply to cases opened by customers or whoever? Okay, so you have a help desk tool, you have field technicians, you have experts, you have customers coming, trying to solve the problem by reading the documentation, or if they fail, if they can't find the content, or if they don't understand the content, or for whatever reasons they have, maybe they are lazy, they don't even check your documentation, maybe they have checked, they don't understand it, maybe they have searched, they couldn't find, maybe it's existing, maybe not, but they don't find the search the right way. At some point, your customers, your stakeholders may need help, and then they go to your help desk tool and they open a case. And then you have support agents, experts behind the help desk tool, getting these questions and trying to reply to that, usually by the knowledge they have or by getting to the existing documentation, different silos, and searching internally in your company. So let's assume that you've rolled out 3 topics with all the necessary content collected, aggregated, combined into 3 topics knowledge repository. Your support agents can go there, look for more information, and then you see that your support agent is just a proxy between the question and the internal knowledge, trying to find the knowledge, craft an answer, reply to the customers based on that knowledge that exists inside the company. And that's a learning proxy, because normally a support agent, once they have found a solution to that problem, the next time they have the same question, they could reply directly. So it's sort of a learning proxy between the users and the knowledge. So the question is, can we ease and streamline the work of support agents by using AI that can access all the knowledge inside your company and try to craft an initial answer, reply to that case, and maybe then let the support agent check the reply before showing it to the end customer so that you reduce the risk. So I'm removing here the risk from this situation, because we have always experts validating the reply generated by AI, okay? So take out the risk, this risk thing. We're just trying to evaluate here the accuracy, the quality of the replies generated by the AI system. We started doing that in 2022 first, before building the monitoring and the evaluation system. And you see here, we were sort of evaluating the quality manually. So this is a small tool we developed that was reading real questions from customer from our help desk tool, generating an answer based on internal knowledge. And we were reviewing initially those generated answers manually, just to check if that could be feasible. And at some point, say, oh, it seems to work. But how much does it work? How good is that? Is it working? And truth is, it's not a yes/no answer. It's not like, can we use AI for protein folding? It's not yes or no. It's what percentage, what's the accuracy, or what percentage of my cases does it perfectly handle? How far are we from the computed model for protein folding? It's not yes/no. 40%, No, can't use. 92% AlphaFold 2, it's a yes. It's a yes, which is not 100%, but at least you know where you are. So then we said, okay, we need to measure and get a sense of how far we are and how it works. And what percentage of my cases does it solve automatically? And then the question is, it depends, because once you have an initial system, you may have a score, and then you can improve that, fine-tune the system to get a better score up to you reach that 92%, for example, in the case of AlphaFold 2. And then you can fine-tune your system. And such AI system depends on many parameters. The retrieval phase, the prompt that you write, the LLM that you use. So the question, in fact, is not how much, well, how many cases, is can we tune the system in such a way that we increase our capability? To what level can we go? And over time, does this system that we've built that maybe is at 90% and we can use automatically in production, is it degrading over time, improving over time when we change the content, we change the prompt, we change the LLM because the model evolves themselves? So you need to measure, because it's not that you have something at one time, it works, but it may degrade over time because of the questions, because of your content, and because of the technology itself. And believing that just getting the latest model will improve is wrong. Maybe the new model, the new LLM, GPT 4, 5, or 5, may in fact give a lesser answers and lesser quality than what you got with the previous model. So you have to track that. So that's where we are. We need a methodology. So we have our use case. We'd like to know how good we are at automating reply to cases, and what's the gap, and how many of those answers are good or not. So we need for that to build a system, and the AI system that we want to measure. We need to build a test data set, questions and validated answer, we'll see that. And then we need to run that through the system, evaluate the quality of the replies, get a score, fine-tune the system, and see if we can increase the score to the level where we have enough quality and confidence that we can use that system in production. Whatever in production means, that can still be internal use, but we can measure that. And then we say, oh, 90% internal use, perfect. But we see then we can also automate the tracking over time of how that system evolves when the technology changes. And then we know when we need to stop using the system or retune the system because the quality is lowering and is degrading. So step A, build a RAG solution, because that was the choice here. That can be an agentic system, that can be whatever it is. Here it's about a RAG system for automating answer to cases. That's the system we want to evaluate. So the point isn't about the solution itself, but still that's a big thing every company wants to do, building a chatbot based on RAG. So there's an indexing phase, you need to compute the embeddings of your content, store these embeddings in a vector database. At query phase, you need to do the same, compute the embeddings of the question, retrieve content, feed a prompt template that you have written, send that to the LLM, get the reply. So there are many aspects, and if each step, like the indexing phase, you need to clean the content, split the content, compute embeddings, choose the encoder, choose the database, put metadata in place. So I won't dig into that. The subject of today is not how to build a RAG system. We provide that out of the box with 3 topics, but it's pretty complex. But it's just to show you that there are many, and that's for handling the queries when we've built the index, compute the embeddings, search, retrieve, prompt, LLMs, all of these steps. Won't dig into that, but just to give a sense that there are many aspects into this technology stack to build that RAG-based chatbot question answering system, automating reply to cases. And each of those lines, embedding, search, retrieval, may have 10, 15, 20 parameters that you can change as well. So multiplied by the numbers of steps and blocks means that there are hundreds of parameters that can be changed to fine-tune your system and make it better. And that's why we need to know when we turn one knob, if it's better or lesser. So for knowing that, we need to build a test set. So what does it mean? In our case, it means building a set of questions and the related answers that form the ground truth. It's like having these 150,000 known protein shapes. That's the ground truth. We know for 150,000 protein sequences, what is the shape? That's for learning, that's the ground truth. And then we start asking new questions, and we need to know how far we are if you use that. We know the truth, we know what the answer should be. Let's measure our system. But here you need to build that system. You need to build that test set. So it's basically it. You can do it in a spreadsheet typically, and you see that's what we've built internally. So that's a screenshot of our spreadsheet. There's a question, and that is the expected answer. That's what we write as being the truth. And then we have few columns as who wrote it, the team, the topic, because we have categories and all that. So in this definition of build a representative set of questions and related answers, representative means different subjects, both precise and vague questions. So you have to sort of be very, sort of cover all the sort of questions you could get from your customers. And how many lines, how many questions do you have to create? Few thousands. So that would be good, like 2,000-3,000 would be good for evaluating your system. But you can start with less. You can start with a few tens, few hundreds, and add more over time once you have started improving your system. So how do you build that test set? How do you build these 1,000, 2,000 lines, which are the 2,000 questions with the replies? So you can gather that by looking at your help desk, typically, questions from real users. So you can check and say, oh, that's a good one. Let's copy paste that. Oh, that's the answer that we should have here. Extracting the answer from the help desk is not always easy, because most of the time you would see that answers to questions are maybe threads of discussion, and you don't have a summary at the end that is, this is the official answer to that question. So you have to rebuild that, either manually or using an LLM. You can ask experts internally to write questions. Like you can get to, and it's quite fast, because if you have like existing technicians, subject matter experts in your company, and you have few tens of them, like 100 of them, if you ask each of them to write only 20 questions and 20 answers in their domain, giving them some directive on how to do it, then suddenly you have 1,000, 2,000 questions. So using internal experts and internal people is good. You can automate the generation of those questions. It's called synthetic data using an LLM, which means that you can take an LLM and your existing documentation, and you can write a prompt the LLM to say, read that section, read that chapter, read that whatever, and please generate 2, 3, 4, 5 questions on that subject and the answer. So you use another LLM for writing questions and answers based on existing content. That's a way to do it as well. That's why you see here in our case, the third column, we've been using Claude from Anthropic to write questions as well. So we've automated questions generation using LLMs on the existing documentation, using internal experts, looking at the help desk tool to see the sort of questions people were asking. So we've created a test set. So now that's what we have. We have our test set. We have our about 1,000, 2,000 questions, 3,000 of them. And we can run those questions to the system to be evaluated. We get the generated replies. And for each question now, for each of these, say, 2,000 lines, we have the validated answer from the test set, the one that we expect written by humans, and the generated answer by the system that we need to evaluate. So what we need to do now is compare those two answers, the humanly written one, the valid one, and the one that is generated by the AI system. Just like the proteins, the one from X-ray crystallography compared to the one computed by the model. So the question is, how do you measure the distance between those two answers that we have for each question? That's the tricky part. So we need a score. In the case of protein, that was easy. They were comparing the XYZ coordinates of each atom, because that's what you expect in the model. So they were measuring the distance by atom and summing all those gaps in distances. In our case, it's text. So it's like a paragraph, it's 2 phrases, and we need to measure the distance between that. How do we do it? Well, in our case, we ended up discovering that we need to put a score, and the score is 0 or 1. Keep it simple. It's not like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not like an extra measure. It's not a continuous value. We went to the point where what we learned is like, make it 0 or 1. with this rationale. One, yes, I would take the reply generated by the system and I would show it to the user as it is. Even if it's not perfect, it's true, it's good enough. I could use it as is. Or zero, no, checking at the generated answer. We can't use it as it is. It would have necessitate the support agent, the expert, to rewrite a bit the question because either it's wrong, it's incomplete, it's too vague, many reasons. So would you use it or not? Very simple. And then once you have the 0 or 1 to compare the two answers, you can explain why. So it's not like it's 0 because, or it's 1 because it's good enough. Usually it's more the 0 that you need to document. Why do you feel that you wouldn't use that reply in production for and show that reply to the end user? Again, something is missing, it's wrong, but the truth being that sometimes it's 0 because the information is missing in the documentation. So maybe there are many reasons why the generated answer would be wrong, because just the system couldn't find that answer. It's not existing, or it exists but it's not good enough, or so you have the idea here. So now that we have a way to evaluate, what does evaluate mean? For us, it's setting a score, 0 or 1. Would not use that reply, and reason why, if it's a 0. How do you do that? You can take your 2000 generated answers and have a human read those answers and say, oh, 0, 1, manually. You could do that manually. So you need a tool for that, like you would have all this capability to review dialogues, chatbot. Yeah, it's a chatbot dialogue, but reviewing all that and put a score on that. But you understand that doing that manually is a very tedious process, especially because it's 2000 questions, takes time, but every time you turn a knob, you change one parameter in your solution, you need to rerun the test, regenerate 2000 answers, and review those 2000 answers again. So it means that if it takes you a week to review that, or a day with 10 people, you can only do one change a day, and you may need to change 40 parameters 3 times, 100 times, or thousands of times to get to this quality that you expect from your system. So manually, in fact, not only is it tedious, but in fact, it's not applicable. So you need to automate this measurement of how far the generated answer is from how good is it compared to what you expect. And you need to automate that. So how do you automate that? In fact, that's pretty simple. That's our system. We have the questions, we run them, we've got our generated replies, we've got our validated answers in the spreadsheet. And we need to compare expected to generated. And the way to automate that is use an LLM for that. So you can use a third LLM, normally not the one you've been using for generating the replies. So not this LLM that you've been using here. Maybe not either the one you've been using for creating synthetic data to avoid biases, because then the LLM would accept the answer because that's the question you wrote. So if you use a third LLM like Google Gemini or whatever, then you prompt them and you give them the question, the two answers in the prompt, and you say, this is the question, this is the knowledge, this is what we expect, this is what the system has given. Tell me if it's good or not. That's pretty much the prompt. Well, it's more sophisticated, but that's the idea. And then you automate that, and it's pretty fast to do. And then you get for each question a 0 and a 1 and a reason why. So to show you the principle, instead of, we built a small tool for that, for making that visual. So typically here, that small tool, you can choose the question from the 1000 lines. Here, you see the query. You see we display immediately the valid answer, and we first have the generated answer, and then we ask the system to check the difference. So here, let's choose a solution. You see the ground truth. You see the answer generated, and then we click on evaluate, and then we have the score created by the third LLM. Say, oh, I'm okay with that. I mean, the answer that has been generated is good enough, looks good compared to the truth and the documentation for that question. Okay, and if you look, it's right. So that's what we have here. We have this comparison. We don't do that manually, selecting the questions, running the answer, clicking on evaluate, getting 0, 1, and putting that manually in spreadsheet, just for showing you the principle, because all that is automated, fully automated. And at the end, we know how many of the 2,000 questions have a 0, how many of them have a 1, and that gives us a percentage of quality. So give you a few examples here of what we have. Here, yeah, works. System tell is good. Generated is consistent with ground truth. And you see, sometimes it's interesting because the question is, it's about 3 topics. How far back can I view historical data in analytics report? The answer written by the expert is 13 months plus the current months. And then you see the bot generates after 40 months data is no longer available. It's absolutely consistent. It's a 1. Yep, works. Here, it's still valid. Obviously, there's no content around semantic data in the knowledge base. So the ground truth is I don't know. And the answer by the bot is I don't have specific information, blah, blah, blah. So it's consistent. Maybe the generated answer is a bit verbose, but it's good, it's true. So it could be used like that. In some cases, in fact, we do have the evaluator say, no, the generated answer by your system is not good enough. The reply in that case, the reply is not specific to the question, it's too generic, because it does not really reply to the question, so 0, and we have a reason why. Or here, it's sometimes even the evaluator, the score by the evaluator is debatable as well. In that case, the generated answer was not wrong, but a bit too takey and maybe not what was expected by the user. So even your evaluation system is not perfect. That's why you need a lot of questions, like 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, because even the evaluator, when the answer is on the edge, on the thin line, may say 0 or 1, even though that could be the opposite. But if you have enough questions and most of them it's clear enough it's a 0 or 1, your score at the end is good, is really good. So that's where we are. And then once you have this score that you get from running the system, you can fine-tune your system, iterate, and all that. So in our case, when we run the initial system, the score was 66%, which with the idea that 90% is the golden score, the threshold above which only you can start using things in production. But in fact, we realized that 66% was not really meaningful because it's easy to build a test set, in fact, that gives 100% or 0% good replies. You can write super complex questions, very tricky, so that the system almost always fails. Or you can write super simple questions as well, being a bit naive about the question, and then your system is always good as replying. But it means as well that then your test set is not really representative of the real use cases. So we figured out a way that documentation can be missing or incomplete. Sometimes the system was not able to reply to the question, so got a 0. And when we checked, that was because we didn't have enough content, enough documentation. So that helped us improve the documentation by adding more knowledge into the system. Sometimes it's the prompt as well that does the evaluation that can be very conservative. So you can write a prompt, the evaluator, you know, the system that is evaluating automatically, the LLM, and the prompt that you write, you can write it in a way that it's super strict. And most of the time there's no 0, 0, 0. So it's like you have to tune the prompt, so which means that at the beginning, you have as well to humanly evaluate your machine evaluator to understand what's happening. But when it's done, you can rerun that, fine-tune your system, make it better, refine the prompts until your system becomes trustable. So that's part of the fine-tuning all these subcomponents of your RAG system, get there, and you can, and in our case, we were able to reach 90% quality. So we're happy with that. But again, the idea is not about can we use RAG. It's more like showing you that, and that's probably the wrap up here. My last slide is what I wanted to share with you today. I think the question of whether or not regulated industries can use AI, I think it's not a good question. It's not a valid question. I think it's what are the use cases for which we use it? Because if we choose the use cases wisely, it's good to use it. there are many, many use cases that don't create that many risks or that creates complex liability that can be even helping you reduce risk inside your company. Then once you go down that path and you start using those AI systems, the most important thing really is measure the quality, build the quality assessment tools that go with each system, find a methodology, design test sets, run those, measure that part, not only initially for building the system until you reach this 90%, that is good enough, because probably 100% is not achievable, does not mean anything. But then reaching that, and then particularly monitoring over time the potential regression of your system so that you can keep faith in these systems that you've built. Because the worst thing that could happen is that you build a system, it seems to work. In fact, you haven't really measured the quality, and some people even initially find problems and you are not able to track that. But the biggest risk for me is that you got something that works, but over time it degrades and you're not even able to monitor that. And then you start having people complaining and you don't know why and you don't know what, and you are not even able to then retune your system because you don't know where you are in terms of quality. So I think that what I wanted to share with you regarding using the use of AI in any regulated industry, like there are many, many use cases for which there's no question, and forget the idea that, oh, let's put a chatbot in front of everyone that does everything. Probably that's not the best use case to start with. But again, whether you go for that or any other use cases, measure, 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 and then you'll know how good your systems are and how much you can trust them. That's it. Yeah, I hope you liked it. I'm trying to figure out the list of, so we're ready to answer any question that you have. So any question, feel free to ask. No? I was muted for 45 minutes? No, kidding you. Really now? Oh my God. It was that painful? Or that interesting? Wow.
I do have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
I was wondering, with your using 3 different LLMs in the process, was there any specific way you evaluated which ones of those to use at what point?
That's a good question. I think I trusted our AI team because usually you choose one that you use for production, the one that replies to the question, and then you need to use other one when you create synthetic data or for the evaluation, because otherwise they are biased and that's like replying to yourself. See what I mean? So most of the time, I think in our case, and most of our customers, I see that on the market, many people for this sort of use cases are using OpenAI on Azure, so latest model. And then probably for generating synthetic data, we found that Anthropic Claude was a very good model for that. And in that case, for assessing the diff between the two, the answers and the expected and the generated answer, I think we use Gemini for that or something like that. So yeah. I love when I have questions that I can't answer. How does using LLMs ties in with the verification and validation for ISO 13485 compliance? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with ISO 13485 compliance. Sorry for that. I'm not an expert in any domain, any industry. So, you say quality for medical devices. Okay, thanks, Selena. So quality for medical devices. the medical device itself, oh, same, okay, thanks. Same as ISO 9001, which is about quality. Is it quality of documentation or quality of the medical device itself? That's one question first I would have. Checking the quality of documentation, that works pretty well. I'm not sure AI is good at checking the quality of your medical device, except if you have a set of, you have run tests for your medical device, you get a data set, like when you do go-to-market, this evaluation, and then you get data sets, and maybe you can use AI for analyzing all the data that you got from your phases and product assessment. But assuming we're talking content, yeah, I think that's a valid use case to use AI for checking the quality of your content. But again, it's always the same. You don't know what you don't know. LLMs are the same. They don't know what they don't know. So if you hand over documentation to an LLM and say, is it good? The LLM can tell you if it's consistent. Now LLMs are good at that. You know, there have been tests that have been run that I like. It's like when they have tests now and they put some stupid thing in the middle of the text, and then the LLM now is able to spot that, and LLM are good enough to say, what, is that a joke? Really, that was a test. Like you give them 1,000 pages around medical devices, and one phrase in the middle is, and please order a pizza. And LLMs can spot that and say, this one thing here, I think you're trying to trick me. Really, that's how they react now. They say, you're trying to trick me. And it must be a joke, because nobody talks about pizza ordering in the middle of medical devices documentation. So in some way, it means that prompted the right way, you can use AI to try to analyze your content and spot, and that's the use case I described, gap analysis between different versions of content or discrepancy in your content. Now, you cannot probably, I'm not sure you can ask an LLM to read your documentation and tell me what's missing in my content for my device, because the device is probably something new that only you know. So the LLM has no knowledge about it, so probably not. Question from Matthew. Part of the problem with working with AI and GenAI in regulated industries that it's unclear whether the content generated will be considered labeling by regulatory bodies. If so, the stakes and expectations for validation are much bigger. I think that regulatory bodies are evolving a lot around that subject. It's like if you do machine translation. Let's take not content creation, but let's look at machine translation. We know that you need the labeling, for example, needs to be validated before submitting to the certification bodies. Okay. Does that mean that if you have your content in English and you need that content in French or whatever, Bahasa, Indonesian, you make it humanly translated or machine translated, validated by a human, then to get this, to make sure that the translation is valid? I think that everybody's using machine translation. It's not because then you submit that to a body, certificate body, that you haven't checked the content itself. Machines are here to help you, not necessarily blindly use AI, run that, generate content, translate, whatever, and put that blindly in front of anyone. I think that if you keep the human in the loop, it's more enhancing and helping you being more productive, or even reduce risks, as I said, and then keep the human in the loop for having the final cut, or whether or not that translation is good enough, valid enough, precise enough, or that content that you have used AI for helping you writing is good enough as well. You still need subject matter experts if it's content that needs to be certified, like labeling. But doesn't mean that you can't use AI either. So it's not like a 0-1. You can use AI, but keep the human in the loop. I think that's probably the one thing. Matthew is, so I'm referring to cases where the end consumer of the content is a clinician or a patient using a medical device, which I agree. I mean, you can use AI for helping you use that write and enhance the content, but I would still keep the human in the loop if that content is to be used, consumed by a very end consumer. And I would probably say the closer to you, the consumer of that information is, the less formal validation you need. You see what I mean? If you have, can you use a chatbot for replying to a very specific question if the user of that chatbot is a trained, certified technician that has enough knowledge to say, not sure it's right, or give me the answer, show me the source content at the same time. It's also about the UI. It's like building AI, building solutions where not the chatbot where you ask a question, you have one phrase like that's the answer. That can be showing the answer and showing the on the side the content itself and highlighting the where it comes from so that people can rapidly check. Because it's not the same checking an answer with the source content from which that answer comes from side by side than letting the end user search for the content, open the document, read the document to spot that information inside the 2 pages where that section where the reply is. You see what I mean? It's like helping. You can use AI for helping, giving faster access to content, but still say, this is the answer because of that paragraph in that document, show, highlight that. And in that case, you're just making way faster the access to the reply, the knowledge, still making that highly visible, the why. And maybe you can still make that only visible or use the end consumer, maybe someone that is knowledgeable. In that case, you've absolutely reduced the risk. You're just helping that user being faster at finding the information they need. Any other? Yep, Selena, feel free to reach out. Any other question you would have? No? I think we're good. We're at the top of the hour, past the top of the hour. So maybe we can stop here. I hope you liked it. But again, it was more sharing. Again, it's I hope it's not deceptive. You were not expecting a yes or a no, or that we would present the perfect solution. I think that's where we are today. I think it's a yes. It's some sort of a yes if you choose your use case, but whatever you do with AI, and it's going to come back to this protein folding thing. It's like it's not perfect, but there was nothing before. So why not accept something that does 92% precision, which again makes the model so close to reality that sometimes it's only one angstrom. I think the average, the mean average is 1.2 angstrom for AlphaFold. Love this model, the thing where we see the difference. So see, if we can get there and then over time do 92% become 93, 94, 95% and become better than human, so why not do it? And I think that's going to come. So that was what I wanted to share with you.